The Cookie Monster. From My Horizontal Life, a collection of one-night stands by Chelsea Handler. I used to live with a 28-year-old virgin. That's right, not a Mormon, not a religious thing, just plain stupid. You'd have thought someone had sewn her vagina shut. Who in her right mind would willingly abstain from something that could give so much pleasure and pain at the same time? I asked myself again and again. I just wasn't getting it, and neither was she. Dum Dum and I were like the odd couple. Dum Dum was tall, with tight curly red hair, and looked like a full-grown Annie. I would sashay around the living room in my brand-new thong and bra combo, while she'd lie on the sofa in a pair of her favorite Winnie the Pooh jammies, buttoned to the top, slurping down a pint of Ben & Jerry's. She would bake cookies, watch nothing but reality TV, and talk on the phone for hours with her parents in New Jersey. I would come home slosh 3 or 4 nights a week, and the others I wouldn't come home at all. Since I was also 2 years her junior, Dum Dum took this to mean that she was in charge. If we ever went anywhere together, she would drive, and every apartment bill was put in her name so she could oversee all payments. She also had a severe case of OCD, so after I went to bed, she would come out of her room, make sure all the appliances were turned off, and rewash any dishes I had washed. You would have thought I was living with Rain Man. I'm convinced that Dum Dum's parents were the reason for her social ineptitude. She relied on her father for guidance on everything from what deodorant to use to what brands of electronics to buy. Not only did she not have any sexual contact in the 2 years we lived together, she rarely went out at night. She preferred to stay in and watch The Bachelor on the 72-inch television her father bought her for our 2-bedroom apartment. The resolution was so intense you couldn't even make out what was on the screen while sitting on the sofa in front of it. We'd have to stand in the dining room close to the front door to get a clear image. More important, she didn't like alcohol. There are 2 kinds of people I don't trust, people who don't drink and people who collect stickers. I always dreamed of Dum Dum going on Howard Stern and playing Stripper Jeopardy. She thought the Senate was a type of cookie. I asked her once during an election if she could name the 2 presidential candidates. She said, duh, Gore and Bush. I said, okay, and who's Gore's vice president? She said, I'm not that stupid, Bush. Her room was covered in roses and NSYNC posters. You would have thought she hadn't gotten her period yet. She took a bath every night and never took showers. She cried the first time she was pulled over by a cop. I explained to her that there is no reason to cry when getting pulled over unless you're coming directly from a crime scene. We were living together on 9/11, and she was convinced it wasn't a big deal because her father had told her everything would be all right. My dad said it's going to be okay, and they may have already caught the guys who did it. It was as if the whole event had been an episode of Charlie's Angels. About a week later, I was driving her to the dealership where she had just bought a new car. The country had been on many different levels of high alert, and no one knew when we would be invading Afghanistan. I was saying how it was so scary to know that at any minute we could go to war. She panicked and said, oh my gosh, is that today? Dum Dum worked at a flower shop, which was the perfect job for her. She supported her insanity by placing herself in an environment where everything really was coming up roses. It was the ideal environment, allowing her to be completely and happily oblivious of the world around her. Every Monday through Friday, she would wake up at the crack of dawn to sell flowers. I never quite understood why people needed to get flowers at 7 a.m. on a Tuesday, and found it curious that somebody could get excited by anything other than a pancake that early in the morning. Dum Dum had a major crush on some reality television show host who used to eat breakfast next door to the flower shop every morning. She spent most of her time standing in front of the flower shop in order to see when he sat down at the cafe. Then she would act surprised when he appeared and go over to say a casual hello. There are many forms of stalking, and combined with driving by his house several nights a week, this was one of them. I urged her to stop wasting expensive petroleum on trips to his house and instead put that effort into breaking his cell phone code and checking his messages. Every afternoon, she would come home and go on and on about this guy. How today he told her she looked pretty and smiled before ordering his eggs. She would ask me if I thought it was a sign that they both loved hard-boiled eggs. Only if you're on an Easter egg hunt, I told her. Then she would get on the phone with her parents and replay every minute of their conversation. What a disaster. If I ever called up my father talking about a guy, he'd pretend he wasn't getting any reception on a landline. Despite the fact that all they'd done was talk about eggs and their deep respect for the Easter Bunny, Dum Dum was convinced that this guy was going to come bursting out of her television screen and propose to her. She had the emotional maturity of a 7-year-old, put us together, and we were 15. Her crush had been raging for close to a year, and finally I couldn't bear it anymore. If she wasn't going to stop talking about it, I was going to help her get him. First, though, she needed to get penetrated. It was time to hire a male prostitute. I had used him once before to rough up my friend Lily right after a breakup. She was pleased with him, a little too pleased. She had attached to him, and he had to start pseudo-dating her, which cost me a fortune. He finally had to let her down easy because my unemployment ran out, but at least she got over her ex. Ed was great, hot face, hot body. He was sweet-natured, which kind of got on my nerves, but I knew Dum Dum would love it. And while I wouldn't call him stupid, he definitely wasn't home separating ions in his spare time. I met him at a bachelorette party, thrilled to encounter my first male hooker. I had strolled the Hollywood Strip many a weekend night looking for a soulmate, but never found anyone who actually resembled a man. Ed felt bad after what happened with Lily, so when I called him about Dum Dum, he told me he'd throw in a little extra. Didn't quite know what that implied, but hoped it meant anal. To set up the rendezvous, I took Dum Dum to a Backstreet Boys concert, the only way that I could get her out of the house. There have been a couple times in my life where I have considered killing myself, and this was one of them. Watching these 5 guys prance around on stage made me question so many things about our culture. 1, where were their instruments? 2, were there actually women out there who were turned on by this? Unfortunately, I was chaperoning one who was. Dum Dum was just about climaxing. Not like she would have known what had happened if she had. I had Ed meet us there, and we would accidentally, quote-unquote, bump into him. Then he would introduce himself as the Backstreet Boys manager and allude to the idea of going backstage. He looked really good that night, and Dum Dum actually spotted him before I did, pointing him out as a cutie standing by the bar. Oh my gosh, I know that guy. That's Ed. I've met him a bunch of times, I said. What on earth is he doing here? The look of excitement on her face was enough for me to call it a night. This plan was going to work. We went over to him, and I made the introductions. Dum Dum, this is Ed. Ed, this is my roommate, Dum Dum. Ed gave her his newly bleached smile and said, well, Dum Dum, Chelsea never told me she had a roommate who was cuter than her. This guy was good. Really? Oh my gosh, you're so funny. This was her standard response to anyone she liked, whether what he said was funny or not. I left them alone to scope out my own man, but within a few minutes I started to feel sick. My stomach was churning, and I had broken into a cold sweat. As I leaned against the wall for balance, doubled over from nausea hit me. The Backstreet Boys were actually making me ill. I really had to get out of there. Luckily, this could work in favor of my plan. I couldn't believe I hadn't thought of it on my own. I went back inside to find Dum Dum and Ed and explained that I wasn't feeling well. Just as I had suspected, they were sitting together in a booth where he was regaling her with stories of who knows what, and she was eating it up. I asked Ed if he would mind driving Dum Dum home because I wasn't feeling so hot. She looked a little scared for a second, but he assured her that she would be in good hands and he would be nothing but a gentleman. I gave Ed a look to make sure he didn't mean that. The minute I stepped outside and could no longer hear the music, I felt much better. My girlfriend Jen was going to some male model party that night, so I decided to give her a call. She didn't even answer her cell phone with hello. She just picked up and said, "Get your ass over here now if you know anything about anything." Jen was Ivory's roommate, and I had grown to like her just as much. Mostly because, unlike Ivory, she could hold her liquor and didn't believe in long-term relationships. Jen was the kind of girl who went out only once every so often, so when she did, she meant business. This was gonna be good. I got to Falcon at a little after 11, plenty of time to make some one-night connections. There were models everywhere. The unfortunate thing was that there were some female ones too. Good. A challenge. I found Jen surrounded by 3 guys who were all named Ross. She threw one my way, and Ross and I grabbed a table in the back. Over drinks, I told him all about my roommate and the night's secret mission, and he thought it was hilarious. He must have laughed at everything I said, which can be very annoying, but only in the morning. Ross told me how much he hated modeling and all the pressure and blah, blah, blah. His teeth were so white, I found myself wondering what kind of teeth bleaching agents models had available to them that weren't available on the regular marketplace. He was a little predictable, but I'd met a lot worse. I thought he had potential in the game of life if he played his cards right. He definitely had potential in the game of my vagina, but who didn't? All the other Rosses joined us, along with Jen and some model girl she befriended. Jen befriends everyone. In this case, I had no objections, because the minute this girl opened her mouth, Dum Dum seemed like a nuclear physicist. Here was proof that lots of people are indeed very challenged. She kept giggling and talking about her parrot, who couldn't stop saying poop. Like, poop is such a naughty fucking word. Eventually, everyone started ignoring her, and I think she may have finally fallen asleep at the table. Jen and I had some alone time, while Ross 1, 2, and 3 went to get some more cocktails. A minute later, I noticed Ross chatting up some other girl at the bar. I'm not the jealous type, but I had to lay down the law. "Hey, Ross!" I shouted. 3 guys turned to look in my direction. "No, you!" Not wanting to be rude, I pointed at my Ross with 2 fingers instead of 1. "Who are you talking to?" He smiled and said, "I'm sorry, I'll be right back." No, it's okay," I said. "You can talk to other girls, but when I leave, you're coming with me." He smiled again and said, "Yes, okay." Perfect. I had landed my man, and now I could hang out with Jen. I didn't really have much more to say to Ross anyway, and I'd better save what little I did have for later, just in case I found myself in a pinch. Jen went on to tell me how Ivory's current boyfriend, Wang, likes to clip his toenails in their living room, as well as make fruit smoothies every morning and then leave the dirty blender in the sink. "That's annoying," I told her. Dum Dum would never stand for that. "And how is strawberry shortcake?" asked Jen. "Well, judging by the way I left things, she should be really good." I told her about Ed, and after staring at me for close to 30 seconds with her mouth open, she said, "Wow, you're a really good friend." "Well, I can't help it if I'm a giver," I told her. Last call came around, and I collected my man. He followed me back to my place in Santa Monica, and parked in the street, and then we tiptoed inside. Quietly, we sneaked across the apartment toward my room. Dum-Dum's door was shut, so I assumed that Ed was in there popping her cherry. I don't know if I slipped myself a roofie or what, but the next thing I can remember is hearing Dum-Dum screaming at the top of her lungs and Ross nowhere to be found. I looked at my clock. It was 4:30 a.m. I threw on a t-shirt and ran into the hall to find Ross, standing there naked, and Dum-Dum in a pair of Finding Nemo pajamas, still screaming. Apparently Ross thought the toilet was in her room and was so disoriented that he went in there and started peeing on her. I had never taken a guy home to my apartment before because I knew Dum-Dum had an aversion to strangers, especially men. I thought it would be okay that night because I figured Ed would be there too. Then in the morning, the four of us could fill each other in on the details of the previous night, and Dum-Dum could make us all heart-shaped pancakes. Boy, was I wrong. I couldn't even understand what Dum-Dum was saying because it was at such a high pitch. The only other time I had seen her this upset was when I cut off her subscription to Tiger Beat. I told Ross to get lost. It was clearly his cue to leave. He kept apologizing and apologizing, but it didn't help. He just looked ridiculous standing there naked. I had to calm Dum-Dum down. Of course, her first interaction with the penis had to be really up close with urine coming out of it. Not a dream come true. It took me a couple months after my first time having sex to even look at a penis. They're just so silly. Innocently, I asked her where Ed was, and she said she had the best night of her life. But he didn't even kiss her goodnight. That bastard! If only Ed had been there, he could have knocked Ross out, and no one would be the wiser. Plus, I'd have had my bed all to myself. I apologized profusely and told her how sorry I was about Ross. I assured her I'd get rid of him. Then I helped her change her sheets and wash the pee out of her curly red hair. But I knew from that moment on, our relationship would never be the same. When she finally calmed down enough so that she could sleep, I went back to my room. Ross was passed out on the bed. He must have really felt terrible about pissing on my roommate's face. Ross! 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 I yelled, slapping his face. That's not even my fucking name, he groaned. What? That's not even my name. Now he was mad. Please. He told me that was your name. No, you said that was gonna be my name because my other two friends were named Ross. You thought it would be funny if you called me Ross too. Whatever. I said, listen, there's street cleaning at 6. You need to move your car. On a Saturday? Yes, I said, unfortunately. Then he asked if he could come back in afterward. Why, so you can urinate on me this time, I thought. Sorry, I have to go to church very early, I said. But it's Saturday, he reminded me, again. Temple, I said. I think he got the message. If not, he definitely got the message when he realized our street didn't have any street cleaning. I decided that potty training, which had fallen off my list of prerequisites years earlier, would have to make a comeback. It turns out that Ed even found Dum-Dum too stupid. He apologized profusely but couldn't bear to break her heart, and also couldn't bear to listen to her for another second. He told me there was only so much he could hear about The Lion King. The next day I went out and bought Dum-Dum a karaoke machine and told her it would be a great way to jumpstart her singing career. Really? She asked. Has anyone ever done that? Duh, I told her. How do you think Yanni got started? Ed felt pretty bad about the whole thing. He had never not fulfilled his job requirements before. So we both agreed it would be best if we slept together. Talk about fulfilling a requirement.